I think we can get this show on the road. First and foremost, thank you for joining us today. I'm Chantal from Demandwell, and I'm super excited to welcome Ryan and Jason to this session. So I'll let these folks introduce themselves real quick, and then I'll actually give a quick overview of the session.
Cool.
Jason.
I guess since I'm on the left, I'll go,
Yeah.
I'll go first. Hey, everybody, I'm Jason Widup, VP Marketing at Metadata. Been at Metadata for about the last 3.5 years or so. My background is primarily with marketing operations at larger companies. So I spent some time at Tableau and Getty Images and Microsoft, but found my home at startup land, and I don't know if I'll ever go back.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. Ryan Medine, head of marketing at GoodTime. I've been with GoodTime for about 1.5 years. Prior to that, I was with another company called Velocity Global, another hyper-growth startup. So my expertise is very much on the early stage of startup life and building and scaling out marketing functions.
Awesome. And I'm Chantal. I'm the director of marketing at Demandwell, and a lot of my experience lately has been at the very early stage. My first role was in that kind of like tech unicorn private company world, but the majority of the last few years has been, yeah, Jason's hair has changed. A lot has changed in the last few
I
years.
have no hair, Jason, so we know each other well.
Yeah. Okay, so this session is about the first principles of marketing strategy. And what I mean by that is having a super clear and direct line between what you're working on and the goals that you're trying to hit. So like having a really clean relationship between how you're spending your money and the money that you're hoping to generate is kind of the definition of efficiency, in my opinion. So every activity, every dollar is serving a purpose. And as you'll see, Jason and Ryan are incredibly strong in this area. So real quick, the way that we're going to structure the session is that we'll talk about the prep work that goes into building a strategy, actually building the strategy, finalizing that, sharing it with the team, and then tracking your success to make sure you're on the right track. So prep work. Take it away.
I think I'll jump in and kick us off here. So yeah, before you even start planning a strategy, a critical step in my mind is really doing some deep prep work when it comes to what's working well within marketing, but also where is the company going for the year ahead, and especially important right now with headcount being reduced, budgets getting cut. You really want to understand where the company is going before you go build out a strategy so that you can efficiently use your resources, whether it's headcount, whether it's budget. So what we've done here is list out, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but sort of some things to get you thinking through both things on the company side of things, but also on the marketing side as well. So starting on the left, what are from a company perspective, what are the 3 to 5 main pillars, main focus areas for the business in the year ahead? It could be, are you branching into a new geography? Are you trying to go international? Are you trying to launch new products? Are you moving up market? All of these things are critical when it comes to marketing. Marketing supports all of those. So if you don't have a clear understanding of where the company is trying to go, it's going to be very difficult to develop an efficient and effective strategy to move the company closer to those goals. On the ICP side of things, this is also very much tied in with the top focus areas. What are the trends? What are the themes that you're seeing in your current ICP? And is that ICP going to change based on the company strategy? If you are launching new products, like I mentioned, is that going to open you up to a different set of buyers? Is that going to open you up to a new vertical that you need to learn about and build some awareness within that? Or if you are going international, how do those buyers buy? How is that different than what's happening in your current market? So understanding not only the focus areas, but also your buyer group is going to be critical as you build out that strategy. That's going to influence where you need to spend some time. And of course, company revenue targets, are you trying to grow by 20%, 50%, 100%, 5x, whatever it may be? You need to have a sense of where you're trying to go, because that's going to influence your strategy. If you're If you're trying to grow 10x, you're going to have to take some big swings and maybe take some smart bets that can get you that 10x growth. If you're only going for 25% growth, maybe you can be a little more conservative when it comes to your strategy and what you're trying and what your budget is and all that. Also understanding as it relates to revenue, what is marketing responsible for? Is it only marketing driven pipeline or marketing driven new logo ARR? Or is it total pipeline across all groups? Is it net new logo plus upsells? There's so many different ways that marketing gets measured, that having some clarity around that is going to help you as you're building your strategy, know where to focus your energy and your team's energy to help drive towards those strategic priorities of the company. And then we've got a bunch on the marketing side. Jason, I know you've got some thoughts on this, so I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah. So on the marketing side, you really want to understand, one of the most important things to understand is just your baseline metrics. So we all kind of know that, but in order to make a map of where you want to go, we all have to know kind of where we're starting from. And so oftentimes, or most of the time, these should be the metrics that ultimately lead to revenue. And I prefer to use a lot of rates and cost pers first, and then kind of volume-based metrics second. Volume can always shift and change, but rates are usually like the things you want to try and map against. And so really understanding things like cost per MQL, cost per opportunity, what your close rates are, but your conversion rates also between each of the stages. The sales cycle is also important. So all these things you need to really understand. So you kind of see where you're at today and then where you need to go. You also need to understand what your marketing team excels at and where they might need additional support. So doing something like a traditional business school marketing SWOT analysis, just to understand like, hey, what are we strong at? What are we not strong at? Where are things that we need to be looking out for? That'll just help you, even if it's in your mind, maybe not doing a full exercise, just making sure you really understand that before you start planning. A lot of this is like, you're going to do budgeting in planning, but you need to kind of at least have some idea of where it's going. And so like, is it going to increase? Is it going to decrease year over year or whatever your planning cycle is? Sometimes you might have no clue, but you still want to do a plan. And so, you can just make some assumptions here, maybe flat with maybe a 5 or 10% increase, just to get you started somewhere. But, as you're making plans, you'll always just want that to be a variable that you can change. And then everything else kind of like falls in place. You already should know this, but an important input is whether the company is sales, product, founder, marketing led, just whatever led you are, community led. You want to understand how you're led, and you also might be changing it too. So like a lot of companies early on are sales led, and then they switch to something like product or marketing led. And so just understanding where you are in that cycle will really, you should already know, but it's a good input to what you're doing. And then you want big ideas from the team. You want some like moonshot ideas for several reasons. First, oftentimes, especially in startups or high growth, the delta between your resources and where you need to get to can be pretty big. And so you want to at least have some time and resources to focus on some bigger kind of, I don't know, moonshot. Maybe I don't know if that's the best term, but like these bigger ideas that could maybe change the trajectory of your business if they work out. You obviously don't want to, put all your eggs in that basket, but it's nice to have a small basket of that to be able to mess around with. And so I think having those ideas, at least kind of as you're thinking of those, or maybe you've already thought of them, having those at the ready when you're starting to plan is important too. So on the next slide, we have some examples of kind of like, or considerations that you want to think about during this, the strategy prep work. There's often things that you'll learn in this part that will help, or that'll cause you to change direction. And so here's just some examples from us. So for me, a real world thing that happened, and this one I was actually in mid execution of an existing plan. I was told, hey, we're going to acquire a company in about 2 months. But I wasn't given a lot of information about what that was going to be. And so, of course, I had to think about marketing a whole new product and everything like that. And so it caused me to go back, replan based on this new information that I have. Ryan, what do you got?
Yeah. There's many examples of where, this prep work comes in handy. One that sticks out in mind is prior company I was working for, single product company for the most part up to this point. And then all of a sudden it comes to my attention that we're now launching several new products in the year ahead which complicates things. Going from one single product to multi-product, you've got to think about where are we going to spend our time? What's the revenue that we can plan on from each of these products when it's all net new, so we don't have anything to base it on. Not only that, from a campaign and new product strategy, you've got to do all the messaging and everything related to that, which is a big time investment and resource investment. But also that big of a change required us to go back, look at how we were positioning the entire company, because the company was known as this one thing, and we actually had to do a lot of work around messaging and positioning at the company level, at the brand level, to now make sense of why we're offering all of these other products together. And so that certainly played a huge part in the marketing strategy for the year ahead. How about you, Chantal?
Yeah, so something that comes to mind for me is from my last company. I was the first marketer there, and it was super early stage. And in that scenario, I didn't have access to like the historical marketing data and conversion rates that it is really helpful to have. So I was kind of like having to think about what might work based on more anecdotal information about what had worked in the past. So one thing that I noticed there is that the company had an app in the Zendesk marketplace. They were kind of like part of the Zendesk ecosystem, or starting to become that. And I noticed that people were coming from the Zendesk ecosystem. They were landing on our site and they were requesting demos at really high conversion rates, and they were also becoming customers. And so I kind of like took this nugget of information and basically like took a bet on it and blew it out into like a full Tech Alliances partnership. So, sometimes you're planning the thing, you notice a little thing, you don't have that much to work with, but it feels right at that stage. So should we talk about building the strategy?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
We actually have one question in the chat real quick before we transition, which is, what's an example of a moonshot idea? And I also will say, I've gotten this advice in the past. I'm curious to get your guys' take on this, that basically when you're thinking about your strategy for the quarter or the year, you should plan a baseline level of demand based on your non-moonshot ideas. So you basically know that you can hit your numbers without this like crazy podcast going really well, but then you put the crazy podcast in there because you're like, maybe this will take it to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, I wish it was that simple. It's like sometimes like we don't have those resources to make the goal, and we need the shot ideas to actually work to hit the goal. And that's kind of the cycle I've been in the past, is like we actually have no way of hitting this goal without some moonshot idea coming to life. And so an example for me, one we just recently did was taking one of our products and basically making it a free trial, transact online, and then moving it from annual subscription to monthly subscription. For us, that was a huge risk. It took a lot of like analysis. We threw together the most just strewn together MVP possible to get this live as soon as we could. And that's something where we have no idea how is this going to impact the business, but it's a moonshot idea. We have some ideas of how it might affect things, but it could actually change the trajectory of the business. And so I don't know, that's just one example from recent for me.
Yeah, that's a great example. I've got one that jumps to the top of my mind. When I was at Velocity Global, one of our ideas was to sponsor a PGA Tour golfer. That is an out of the box idea for a smaller startup. But the more we'd never done anything like that. We were new to sports sponsorships and started exploring it, started investigating the audience. The golfer was Billy Horschel. I see that question in the chat. Sponsored him for a number of years. It was great for building awareness. We continually increased our sponsorship with him and involvement with him over the years. He aligned with our culture and our values, but also helped us engage prospects and build awareness. So that was an out of the box idea that we continued for many years because it was delivering the results that we were hoping for from that.
Awesome. All right, building the strategy. Take
Cool.
it away.
Yeah, so now you've got all this prep work, you've got a lot of information from all that work that you've done, and so it's time to start building out that strategy. And so there's going to be unlimited things that you can do, right? And so especially in a startup team, you got 5 people maybe. and you've got like product marketing and community, and you've got all these things and just priorities stacking up, but you can't do them all. So you got to really figure out, what are we going to focus on over this next quarter or 2 quarters, whatever your time horizon is. Think of this as kind of like categorizing your work in a way into meaningful buckets that you can just kind of work with. And also it makes it easier to present this stuff to leadership as well. They don't want a big like 5-page Word document that goes through like all of the detail. And so this gets you to kind of start thinking of it in that way as well. So first, you've got some themes that'll probably start to emerge based on all that prep work that you've done. And so from here, you want to start to layer on additional information, like which of these things could have the biggest impact on the business? And maybe for the lowest efforts, you're kind of trying to find the lowest hanging fruit in there. What is your team actually good at doing? Again, we keep talking about that, and you can't expect your team to be solid at every single thing. And also, you don't want to, if something is of paramount importance and you're like, well, my team isn't great at that, it doesn't mean you just don't do it, but you just have to like really understand, how are they going to need support? Do I need to bring in additional resources? That kind of thing. And so all of this should result in 3 to 5. We always talk about 3 to 5. I don't know, the rule of 3, whatever that is, but it's always an odd number. Whenever I end up with 4 or 6, I'm like, I got to add one or take one away. And so this should, you're going to get to these 3 to 5 main themes to focus on. I like to make sure these are written in goal language, so you actually have something to work towards. They're priorities, but they should also be written in goal language with like timeframes and specific measurements that you want to do for each of those. And then for each of those priorities, you want to list the key activities that your team is going to need to do to achieve those goals. Now, it's okay to not know everything that your team is going to do at this point, especially if you're planning like a longer time horizon. It might be, hey, I'm trying to plan for a whole half a year or an entire year, which would be crazy right now. But let's say we're trying to do that. I have no idea what I'm going to have to do to meet this goal in 9 months from now. I probably know what I'm going to be doing right now and maybe for the next quarter or 2, but it's okay if you don't know. I've actually had leaders that have asked me for a plan with activities for the whole year. And I'm like, I don't even know how to do that because things change so frequently. So it's okay. Then, of course, you want to roughly calendarize this thing. And so you know what resources that you have, you know what the priorities are, you know how much you can accomplish. I think it's important here too, that not to plan to 100% of your team's time. You're never going to be able to stop the urgent requests or the fire drills or that kind of thing. And so, for me, it's like a rough 70% of the time. Some people plan to 80%. And so now you've got a fairly kind of blocked out plan with priorities and activities, and you're kind of starting to get ready to put some rubber to the road on this. But before you do, you want to pause for a second and just make sure this amazing marketing plan, this kind of shell marketing plan that you have, is still aligned with the company's goals. And so just a brief example there, like let's say the company has an ARR number to hit mid-year. Well, you just need to know that and plan to that so that you're also doing whatever it takes, to drive to that mid-year ARR goal. And so just taking a pause for a second once you get to this point, it's like, okay, am I still aligned with what we think we're going to do and what the company needs to do? And Ryan, you want to talk a little bit about taking this and validating it with other go-to-market teams?
Yeah, this is a key step that you can certainly, if you gloss over this, you can definitely get the marketing team headed the wrong direction. I've got an example that comes to mind related to ABM, and ABM is that term is thrown around so much that in some more casual conversations before the strategic planning process, the marketing team thought that ABM was the way to go. There was multiple reasons for that, where we were trying to head, the accounts we were going after. We wanted to capture these big whale accounts, and sales is saying, yeah, ABM, let's do ABM, and CS, same thing, and partnerships, yeah, ABM. And then as we're building out these strategies, ABM was a big one of our pillars for the year ahead. And as I started talking with the sales and CS and partnerships teams about ABM and where we're going to need their involvement and the level of lift cross-functionally from all these groups, it became very, very apparent that we were not ready for a cross-functional ABM approach. They didn't have the resources, the expertise, the time to dedicate to ABM. And so we ended up moving ABM out of our, one of the main priorities we wanted to focus on, because ABM is a team sport. And if you don't have the all the teams bought in. If they're not aligned with it, it's never going to work. You may have some success, but it's going to be way less efficient than if you've got, all go-to-market teams bought in on the ABM approach. Without that buy-in, to me, ABM is just more of marketing doing marketing. It's just reaching the right people at the right accounts. So that's one example where, had I skipped that step, if I didn't share that with the go-to-market team, if we just would have gone and finalized our strategy, we would have probably gotten 2-3 months down the line with ABM and say, hey, what's going on? Why don't we have this buy-in from the team? And then we would have realized too late that now we've wasted, several months of time and effort, being really inefficient because we didn't take this step. So that's a critical step in the process.
Awesome. And then this is just a simple template that I've used in the past that's been incredibly helpful to do what Jason was talking about on the previous slide about like kind of constantly making sure that the key tactics and, strategic levers that you're planning on executing on are indeed satisfying your goal. So basically you have the goal at the top, you have 4 between 3 and 5, 4 kind of like key projects that you're going to execute on that will help you hit that goal. And then you build out the tactics that will support each one. And I think like this, I find incredibly helpful because it forces you to boil down your work into such a clear kind of abbreviated version, which makes it so that like there's no room for inactivity in here that's not supporting your ultimate goal. I got this from Dave Gerhardt, by the way, in the Exit 5 community, if you're curious, and I can share this after. Okay. Budget time.
All right. Yeah. Everyone's favorite topic,
Yeah,
budget.
it just got real.
Yeah. Here we go. Dim the lights.
Yeah.
So yeah, budget. It's always a little bit of an art and a science. You take all these factors into consideration, but then there's always the negotiation and the dance around, what is the right number. So some things that you can think about when you're just trying to determine what is the right budget. Jason mentioned, internal discussions of, what's the sentiment around budget? Or has there been any more casual conversations of, hey, we're ready to invest more in marketing, or we need to be really tight on budget for the year ahead? Those are important data points to have in the back of your mind. You can also look at, hey, what did we spend last year? How much new logo revenue did we drive? If we're trying to drive, double that, then should our budget double? That's just one sort of metric you can look at. Benchmarks, everyone loves benchmarks. I've put a few here that this group here has used in the past. 30% of new logo bookings excluding compensation, 40 to 50% of new logo bookings including compensation, or 8 to 12% of total ARR excluding compensation. Again, these are benchmarks. It's not going to apply, to every company. And if you're chasing 100, 150% growth, you may even be well above these benchmarks because you've got to push harder and you want to drive growth faster than if you're only trying to grow 10, 20%, you might be even below these. Even in today's environment, if with all the focus on efficiency and productivity and ROI, teams may see their budgets well below these benchmarks, even if you are trying to grow by 50+%. So these are benchmarks I've used in the past. We're in a little bit of a different state right now in 2023. So even these benchmarks may not apply, but wanted to give everyone some benchmarks just to jot down as a way to bump your budgets up against things and just kind of gut check where you're coming in. Bottoms up or top down, is it a budget where, hey, this is your dollars, make it work and start allocating it to all the channels? Or is it looking at, let's get the marketing team to build it bottoms up? There's going to be a gap there for sure. Like Jason mentioned, those two things will not align. And so there's going to be a little bit of an internal discussion, looking at how do we allocate budget? How do we close that gap as much as we can? And then start that negotiation process with the executive team. And Jason, I know you've got some thoughts on this, so I'll kick it over to you here.
Yeah, I don't underestimate that tops down, bottoms up. I love this. And I took me a long time into my career before I even knew what it meant. I was like, which one is which? It's like tops down is the one where your leadership is giving you from the top, like your goals and your resources, and you're basically left to do like fuzzy math to figure out like, how do I make these things actually work together? So the resources and the goals actually show that they're going to be able to, hit those goals. And then your bottoms up is like starting from the bottom, which is like, all right, what are the resources I have? And then working your way up with some historical data, things that you might know that you're going to change to figure out what can I deliver. And the difference between those two is where you're going to be focusing. You know what I mean? Because like, you're pretty confident about your bottoms up. You're not confident about your tops down. And so it's that middle ground where you're like, I got to figure that out. And so I do these religiously because it's always good, especially if you've got good historical data, to show leadership like, all right, this is great. You've got great ideas. Thanks for the resource. Thanks for the goal, but it's not even possible, And so, and you can show a bottoms up. And if your bottoms up is smart and you've got a really big delta, that's where you can start the negotiation, which is also something else I feel really strongly about. Budgeting is a full-on negotiation with your CFO and your CEO. Like, don't think about it any other way. So like, if you go in and negotiate for a new car or a new loan or something like that, you wouldn't walk in with like exactly what you wanted to, where you wanted to end, right? You wouldn't be like, hey, push that number over to that sales guy. Like, I want the car for, $20,000. And so it's the same thing with your budget. You've got to get that hat on where this is a little bit of a game. They think of it that way too. So like you're both playing the game. I go in with a much higher request than I think I actually need to make it happen. Because they want to feel like they can walk you back. The CFO's doing their job of saving some money, kind of. And then ideally you end up kind of where you thought you needed to be. So I love it and I hate it. I've gotten fairly good at it over my time. But yeah, it's definitely a negotiation. So you want to make sure you've got good negotiating skills.
What's so interesting to me as I've this is kind of the first time in my career that I'm really doing this and having these talks with our finance leader. And I feel like they're obviously incentivized to like protect the business and make sure marketing's not wasting money, but they're also incentivized to help the company grow.
Yes.
So like on the one hand, they're trying to protect the company. On the other hand, it is in their best interest to give you what you need. So yes. It's just such an interesting dynamic.
It is. I love it. Cool.
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
So on this one, we've got another couple of examples and considerations. Mine is pretty basic, but it's like enterprise marketing budget. So especially as you're starting to like move up into size of company, there's some of the most complicated variable budgets in an organization. We've got all these like freelancers and we've got ad spend that is not always just like a specific amount every month, all these different things. And so managing your budget strategically should be an advantage for you, especially as you're moving up in larger and larger orgs and larger budgets. Things change. And if you're on top of it and you're like, okay, this changed, I'm not spending it on this, so I can move it over here. And you're just constant, it's like a little bit of a shell game with your budget. That can actually be an advantage for you. And it's been an advantage for me in the past. And so, just make sure you're thinking about budgeting, not as an afterthought, but as something that can actually help you hit your goals.
Yeah. And then from my perspective, like I always kind of build the budget based on a pretty simple formula where you have your program spend target. For me, I try to target 25% of the ARR that we're expected to drive is marketing program spend. And then you kind of have a sense of what it costs to generate an opportunity from each channel. So it's basically just an equation that you kind of put into a spreadsheet and do the math. And it's partially gut and it's partially informed by historical data.
Yeah, on the way I typically plan budgets is, it's more of a triangulation. I'm looking at various benchmarks. I'm using, some other information here, and I'm trying to hone in on what is that right number where I don't think we're setting ourselves up for failure, but also makes me a little uncomfortable because I tend to join companies that are trying to grow by 100+%. So there's always that a little bit of uncomfortable feeling when I think we can get there, but we're going to have one of those moonshot ideas work for us to get us there. But yeah, I'm looking at everything from, what are those big investments that we do want to make? What does our budget look like previously? LTV to CAC, I bring up here because there's no perfect, LTV to CAC golden ratio. I think a lot of folks will say, 3-to-1 is your perfect ratio for a SaaS company, but I think every company is a bit different. but it's important to understand, is your LTV to CAC just so high that you're actually leaving money on the table by not investing more in marketing and not acquiring those customers at a slightly higher cost when you can grow if you invest more in marketing. So just another one to think about if you are leaving money on the table by holding that budget too tight.
I've also, my finance person right now is really into just like payback, like how long it takes to pay back. And basically if it's, you can almost spend like the whole value of a customer to get the customer if the payback period is really fast. So that's kind of similar to LTV to CAC, where it's like, there's a timing element that's really important. And you want to make sure that you're not like, being too like meek. You want to be sometimes more aggressive than feels right.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Let me switch to the next. Cool. Take it away.
Yeah. So one of the most important planning tools that I use in my stack is the demand model. And so what this is, it's like a mathematical model that starts with the end in mind, which is usually going to be revenue or pipeline that's needed for marketing. And then it works its way all the way up to the total number of leads or demos that you'll need to drive in order to like hit that revenue number at the bottom. The important thing here, and I'm going to show a template in the next slide, and I'll send a link to this template that you can all download and start, is really to start simply. Start with big block metrics, maybe not dividing it up by channel yet, just starting with the big block numbers that you already have available that'll help you kind of get to that answer. And then for this to work, you just need to understand your key funnel metrics, kind of what we talked about earlier, these cost per, the conversion rate between each stages, et cetera. And then you put it into a model where you can start to then play with some of these numbers and look at different scenarios of like, oh, well, if I were just to increase my conversion rate by 1%, what would that do? Or if I were to increase my close rate by 1%, what would that mean in terms of fewer number of demos that I might need to drive? And then ultimately you can take the number of demos and you can work that up even further with your ad spend, your cost pers, to understand like how much budget you're going to need to spend, et cetera. So on the next slide, I've got a template. I'm not going to talk through this because you'll see it looks more complicated than it is. But I'm going to put a link in the chat here where you can download it. It's got like full instructions. You can download your own version of it. You can start simply, which I know this doesn't look simple, but this is a pretty simple version of a demand model. And then you can add to it and you can make it more complicated as your needs arise. And so take a look at that template if you think it would help. But this is like one of the #1 planning tools that I use to really determine every quarter, what our pipeline needs to look like.
Yeah, the demand model is key. I actually, Jason, I used your template many years ago when you first shared it out, and have modified it and made it more complicated over the years. But it's a really great tool to just get you warmed up in how you're thinking about things. All right. Yeah. So you've done your strategy. You've got your main pillars. You've got your initiatives. You've got the budget. You've got the demand model all worked out. So how do you boil this down and share it with leadership? So I wanted to share a few like some glimpses of the slides that I typically have used at earlier stage companies, seed A, even up to Series B. This will probably get you there, but again, every company is a little different as far as what the CEO wants to see. Sometimes they want lots of numbers and analysis included. Sometimes they don't want any numbers at all. They want the story. And so I'm going to share what's worked for me, but again, it's important to adjust it and tailor it to your audience. And it boils down to 3 to 4 slides, really. One on the budget, the pipeline, the revenue, the numbers. Couple slides on where is marketing going, where are the 3 areas they're focused on, and some of the initiatives, and then that calendarization of the plan that Jason was mentioning. So next slide, Chantal. So this is what the budget and revenue slide looks like. These numbers are pulled right from that budget exercise that we were talking about, from the demand model. You can plop those right in here. So it's easy to see, how does that marketing spend ramp over the year? It's important, especially at earlier stage companies, to have that visibility into spend If you are looking at, your cash runway and when are we spending big chunks of cash. So important to have that laid out month by month, but also the revenue side of the business, pipeline, new logos, et cetera. It's good to see how that maps up and ultimately rolls up to the number for the year. These next 3 slides kind of start at the high level and get progressively more granular. So I always lead off with this slide. Come up with the one-liner. What is that one sentence, very simple sentence that gives people the understanding of what marketing is focused on in the year ahead? And then I provide the 3 pillars. What's the one word for each pillar, and what's the short, memorable description that people can walk away and say, yep, next year marketing's working on this, this, and this. Then if you go the following slide is one layer deeper, where you've still got the same one-liner, you've still got the pillars, but now you're showing what are those 3 initiatives under each pillar that you're focused on. These I typically, Jason, I know you said you'll include the metrics as part of these. I tend to keep the metrics in sort of a separate doc and keep this more focused on story and initiatives. You can do it either way, but this gives people a good look at, hey, everything that marketing is doing is laddering up to one or more of their pillars for the year. So it all makes sense. It all really funnels up to ultimately the company strategy. And then if you just go one more slide, it takes those pillars and those initiatives and spreads them out for the year. This is really good to know because you can see, oh, we've got everything in Q1. That's usually how it starts. We're going to do all these things in Q1. And then you realize when you put it in a calendar, you're not going to have the bandwidth for it. So then you start moving things around, aligning those initiatives to the company strategic priorities so that everything is in sync and marketing is efficiently using their resources and budget to support those company level initiatives.
Cool. And then tracking to plan wise, this is what I'm using right now. Basically, we have more complicated dashboards with like a lot more going on in HubSpot and Salesforce and whatnot, but this is what I'm looking at every single week. This is what I'm sharing with the leadership team every single week. And I think having like this clear line between leads to revenue, the ultimate goal, it's just really helpful and validates really quickly if your original plan is driving the outcomes that you hoped it would, basically. So you can quickly tell if something's not working and fix it. And it's, good also for the rest of the leadership team, I think, to see that marketing is trying to work against the goals that they said they were, because I think it's so easy for marketing to be seen as like blog posts and, podcasts, but it's like, well, actually we're trying to accomplish something here. And then, tracking like the inputs as well. Jason, if you want to share about this.
Yeah, just, you've got your goals that you're trying to drive, but then you've got all these activities and these programs that you're using to try and drive those metrics. And so it's important to understand, and this is just a screenshot of our Asana board, but just important to track the progress on all these projects that you're working on that are trying to lead to those goals. And so as long as you've got something here, not just tracking the goals, but, how are the programs going as well that are supposed to support those goals?
Totally. I feel like over the years, I've realized more and more that like the best marketing plans are, it's really just about like going back to your original documentation and making sure that it's consistent across every place that it matters. So you're like, okay, here's the goal. Here are the tactics that we're saying we're going to do. Let me make sure it's in the calendar. Let me make sure Asana reflects that perfectly. Like you're really just an organizer as a marketing leader. Cool.
Yep. And to bring us home here, I know we only got a couple of minutes. So if you got any questions, pop them in the chat. Also, I think a lot of people are posting just to us. So if you post in the chat, just post to everybody. So a couple other considerations and we'll wrap this up. Planning, we had a question about this in the chat. Planning annually versus quarterly or whatever the time frame is. And kind of this goes along with the second bullet, the economic landscape we're in. Had this been a year and a half ago, something like that, I might have said, yeah, I'm making a plan for the whole year. Even then though, I was kind of like, I've been around long enough to know like that's not going to hold, but I'll give it a shot, try and plan for a whole year. But now I won't even entertain that. Like I won't plan for more than, I'll try and plan 2 quarters out. That's about it. But then that second quarter is, at least these last 9 months have shifted too. So yeah, understanding your economic landscape, what we're in right now, who the buyers are, which buyers have dropped out, those kinds of things, and really understanding that. And then always something to consider is the cash runway of the business. And so this is always something where Sometimes you just have CFO-based metrics that are being used to decide what the budgets are, how much needs to be cut, how much needs to be added. And so that's just something that, we're all kind of dealing with right now, especially if you're a startup. And then avoid vanity metrics, of course. And so these just get distracting, and oftentimes vanity metrics aren't even leading indicators. And so you just want to make sure your core KPIs are tied to revenue, because I think for all of us, that's probably our company's #1 goal. And Ryan, you want to take the rest?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely. Revenue is the goal we're all tracking to at the end of the day. When you're presenting the plan, I mentioned this briefly, play to your audience. If your CEO is that numbers person and loves to see all the detail, well, then deliver that. Don't just say, oh, it should only be, a 3-slide summary. That's all you need. You have to play to your audience there. And if they like, only pictures on the slides, then tell a great story of the strategy using only pictures. So I've seen everything, from one end of the spectrum to the other. So just get to know your CEO and how they like to digest the information and use that as the starting point. Planning to only 70% of your resources, not 100%. You can never foresee what is going to come up, what's going to break, that's going to suck a bunch of time, what's going to change in the market, that's going to make you pivot. So as much as possible, try to only plan to about 70% of your bandwidth, your team's bandwidth, and be flexible on strategy. We fall in love with our strategies, we lock them in, we get so excited about them. It could all change in a week. It could all change in a month or two. So be flexible. Just because you locked it in doesn't mean you have to stick to it. If there's a valid reason to pivot, then pivot. And I think having that mindset is important as you set out to start executing on your plan.
Well, and being good at planning and strategy is a skill to develop. Like, I'm in my 40s and I'm still not great at it. And it's even more confusing to me because I was in marketing ops for most of my career. And so I'm like, how is it possible that I'm actually not that great at planning? But at least me knowing that, I get help, so I have a mentor that'll help me. My CEO knows that I'm not great at it. And for me, it kind of comes down to like, I make this wonderful plan, and then 2 weeks later, it seems like something else happened, and now we're off on something else. And so I have a little bit of a mental block, I think, for myself in planning. So it's good to know that too, like where you are in terms of your planning capability. And it's okay if you're not great. It's a skill that can be developed.
It's also so interesting, like sometimes you have to just wait and see if the plan will actually work. So there is value in like sticking to the plan, but it's also a skill to be able to recognize like when something is genuinely not working, or if it just hasn't worked yet. That's such a tricky one.
Yep.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to pivot too quickly and not give things a chance to work. So there's that fine line there. But if all signs are pointing to a big red X and you're not seeing any positive signals, then maybe it's time to pivot.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you both so much. We do have to wrap. We are at time. So if people have questions, feel free to email us after the fact. I think everyone has my email, and we'll share the recording and we'll share the deck. And I'll make sure to share out Jason's spreadsheet as well to everyone who joined. So thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Everybody.